Thanks, Holly. Fun fact about Holly, well, I guess not really a fun fact. I met Holly back in April 2023 at this conference in Nashville. I was very excited. This is one of the first events one of the major ones I got to travel to with Trademark's customer outreach. And this was the International Anti-Counterfeiting Coalition. And that's when Holly came to me and said, we have to do a trademark enforcement event. And of course, I ran it right up the chain to my manager, Jason Lott, who was like, yes, we have to do a trademark enforcement event. So here we are. It's so nice to see things coming together, and that because the USPTO is so proactive in that way. We've got a couple of minutes. In fact, we've got 5 minutes before Suzanne comes up. So please take a minute, grab something to drink, and we're going to give ourselves just a few minutes to catch our breath, and I'll be right back. So I'm pleased to introduce our next speaker. Her name is Suzanne Shultz. Suzanne works in the U.S. Customs Border Protection Office. Specifically, she is an attorney advisor in the Intellectual Property Enforcement Branch in the Office of Trade for the U.S. Customs and Border Protection, okay? And let me tell you a little bit about what she does there. She provides legal guidance to the ports regarding counterfeit and infringing merchandise. She drafts memos in response to administrative petitions for relief or seizures. And she does trainings to other Customs and Border Protection components, U.S. government agencies, governments abroad, and to the trade community. Suzanne is going to come now and present on protecting goods at the borders and recording your registered trademark with her office, the Customs and Border Protection. Suzanne.
Thank you, and good morning. My name is Suzanne Shultz, and I'm an attorney advisor in the Intellectual Property Enforcement Branch with CBP. So CBP's mission is actually to protect the border, which includes for people and for goods. Usually we think of CBP as, just trying to keep, dangerous or bad people out, but one of our main mission priorities as well is to ensure that dangerous goods are not coming into the border. So IPR is one of CBP's 7 priority trade issues. So PTIs represent high-risk areas that cause significant revenue loss, harm the U.S. economy, and or threaten the health and safety of the American people. Trade in counterfeit and pirated goods threatens America's innovation economy, the competitiveness of our businesses, and the livelihoods of U.S. workers. It may also implicate national security, threaten the health and safety of American consumers, and it often funds criminal enterprises as well. Just a little bit about CBP's IP border enforcement structure and authority. So CBP is the primary federal agency responsible for securing the U.S.'s borders. CBP provides civil enforcement of intellectual property rights. CBP has independent authority ex officio to examine, detain, seize, and or exclude merchandise at U.S. ports of entry that violate recorded trademarks and copyrights. And I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, but recordation is the cornerstone of trademark and copyright protection at the border. So what IP does CBP enforce? Today we're primarily talking about trademarks, but the Intellectual Property Enforcement Branch, which is my branch, enforces trademarks and copyrights ex officio. So that means as a power of the office. So as soon as you're recorded with CBP, CBP will enforce your trademarks and copyrights just automatically. You don't have to petition CBP every time a shipment comes in. We will actively go out and look for infringing goods. The bottom are enforced only pursuant to an ITC, which is the International Trade Commission exclusion order. So those are utility patents, design patents, and trade secrets. We won't get into that today. So there are 2 types of IP trademark violations that CBP enforces. So the first is counterfeit, and that is when a mark is identical with or substantially indistinguishable from a protected mark. It is spurious, which means that it is applied without the trademark owner's permission. The second level is confusingly similar or merely infringing, and that means it is copying or simulating a mark that would likely cause the public to associate the suspect mark with a protected trademark. We're first going to go over some IPR violation examples here, and the first is counterfeit. So I hope everyone recognizes the Volkswagen mark on the left. And we have a slightly different Volkswagen mark on the right, but we would still consider that to be identical or substantially indistinguishable from the protected mark. And the second or lesser level is confusingly similar, and we have the Nike swoosh on the left and a similar swoosh on the right. It actually says wink, and that would be copying or simulating the Nike swoosh mark. Here you see that it's not the same word, the swoosh is slightly different, but this would confuse the average consumer, and CBP would still be able to make it border enforcement action because this is confusingly similar. So just diving a little bit deeper into what is a counterfeit mark, a spurious mark which is identical with or substantially indistinguishable from a registered mark. Merchandise with a counterfeit mark must be seized. So sometimes the port has a little bit of discretion as to what can be seized or what is not seized. Here for counterfeit goods, the port has to seize any infringing merchandise. Again, we have another example on the right, the registered and recorded Apple logo and design, and on the left we have a slightly different Apple logo. You can see it's slightly tilted, the bite mark is a little bit different, but here again it is substantially indistinguishable from Apple's registered and recorded trademark, and we would consider this to be a counterfeit mark. So the lesser level, which is confusingly similar or merely infringing. It copies or simulates the protected mark. It satisfies the likelihood of confusion test. Confusingly similar merchandise may be seized. The decision is within the port's discretion, and the importer has 30 days to cure the violation. So this means that if there's a sticker on the merchandise or if there's a tag that can be removed, the importer at its own cost can remove or obliterate the infringing mark, but if they are not able to, the merchandise will then be seized. So again, on the right, we have another example. On the far right, we have the registered and recorded Ray-Ban mark. And on the left, we have a sticker, which was on sunglasses, that said Ron Bay. So again, slightly different from the registered and recorded mark, but the average consumer looking at the merchandise would be confused as to the source of the goods, and CBP would first detain the merchandise here, and if the importer was not able to remove the stickers or did not wish to do so because of the cost, this merchandise would then be seized and destroyed. So we've been talking about CBP's enforcement authorities, but what is the foundation of this enforcement? And that is recordation. So we've already heard about registration and the superpowers that you get from registration, but recordation unlocks a lot of superpowers for CBP. So registration relates to the official act of filing a trademark with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office or a copyright with the U.S. Copyright Office. Recordation refers to bringing a valid federally registered right, so trademark or copyright, to CBP in order to protect against the importation of infringing goods. Registration is a prerequisite to recordation, and seizure is not always possible for goods that violate unrecorded rights. Importance of recordation. So legal authorities for detaining, seizing, and forfeiting merchandise are different depending on whether the trademark or copyright has been recorded with CBP. One major benefit of recording with CBP is that you do not have to prove intent here. So you just have to CBP just has to show that the good is counterfeit and we can seize the goods. So recorded trademarks and copyrights are afforded more protection than those that are unrecorded. There's enforcement against confusingly similar marks. Right holders receive notice of the name and address of the parties, associated with the seized goods. So if you want to take further action against the importers later, you're able to do so. There's a pre-seizure exchange of information and images. So this, if CBP needs authentication assistance, we will reach out to you with images, and you're able to assist us with that. And penalties are also available to deter future violations. So penalties are issued against the importer, and this is one benefit of ensuring that this importer stops importing goods with your protected rights on it. So when you record with CBP, what information does CBP ask for? First, you have to provide an image of the registration certificate, accurate images of the protected mark as used in commerce. You can provide them in many different formats, the name or licensees or parties authorized to use the mark, the country of manufacture, the point of contact, the name, address, telephone, and email address, any additional enforcement information that would be helpful for CBP to enforce your rights, and a product authentication manual if you wish to do so. So recordation fees. For trademarks, it is $190 per class of goods per trademark. So when we talk about class of goods, you had to, select those when registering with the USPTO. So you will pay $190 per class of goods when you record with CBP. We keep talking about classes of goods here, so obviously if you have a service, that is not the best to record with CBP because your service is not going to be crossing the border. So any goods that may be counterfeited are really important to record with CBP. For copyrights, it's the same, $190 per copyright. And when you renew your recordation for trademarks, it costs $80 to renew. And again, for copyrights, it's also $80 to renew. For trademarks, the recordation term is 10 years, and it can be renewed concurrently with the underlying USPTO registration, so long as it stays current. And for copyrights, the recordation term is 20 years that can also be renewed. We're next going to go through a recordation tutorial. So if you have a federally registered trademark and you then want to take the step to record with CBP, this is going to walk you through the steps of that. So you're first going to visit iprr.cbp.gov and click New Registration, which is the first button on the left. So next you're going to enter your USPTO registration number for the trademark. And if you just go onto the USPTO search website, this is just an example of where you're going to find your US registration number. So you're going to enter that in and then confirm the registration, that registration number is the number that you wish to record with CBP. You're then going to select your international classes for which you want to record. If you have multiple registered with USPTO, you do not have to record for all the international classes with CBP. You can toggle over which classes you wish to record. You're then going to provide your contact information. This is very, very important for CBP. We always, recording with CBP lets us know that you are willing to assist us with any authentication requests. So we really want to have right holders who are active and engaged and want to help CBP in protecting their trademarks. So completing this as best as you can is extremely important. So you're going to have your name, contact information, phone number, email address, and this is also the point of contact that will be used for any seizure notices. So obviously when CBP seizes infringing goods, you want to be notified of this, so complete information for this is very important. So step 6 is providing the manufacturing country and other optional information. The manufacturing country just assists CBP when we are looking at merchandise and knowing that if it comes from Italy and the shipment is coming from Italy, that's a pretty, that's a good indicator that, it's likely authentic goods. But if it's coming from China and you only manufacture in Italy, that's one red flag that assists CBP. There's also a box to provide CBP with other optional information. Again, as best of information you can provide CBP, assists us in our authentication and ensuring that authentic goods are coming into the border, but this is also just optional information. So step 7 is uploading a registration certificate and specimens. The specimens will only be available to view on our internal database, not our external database. And any optional information that you provide CBP with, again, will only be visible on our internal database and not the public database. The last step is payment. You can provide credit card information, or you can also mail CBP a check. So once you are recorded with CBP, there are a lot of training opportunities available to you to ensure best enforcement of your trademarks and copyrights. So CBP offers recordation holders the opportunity to provide enforcement-oriented training to CBP officers in the field. Training may be conducted virtually or in person at the ports of entry. If you're interested in setting up a training, you please email tradeseminars@cbp.dhs.gov. I spoke about this briefly earlier, but you can also provide CBP with a product authentication guide. We have a template that is available on iprr.cbp.gov that you can use to craft your product authentication guide. I've mentioned this briefly before, but we have 2 different sites, a public site that has very limited information and an internal site that's just for THS and CBP components. So any business sensitive or classified information will only be available to CBP personnel. And this product authentication guide is one of the documents that is only available to CBP personnel. So rest assured that any sensitive information will just be used for authentication purposes and will not be available on our public-facing site. So e-allegations also are available to you as a recordation holder. You can file an e-allegation, and this is when you have very specific information about infringers. So if you know an importer that is constantly importing fake t-shirts with your trademark on it, and you know what port it's coming into, you know what platform, sorry, it keeps jumping ahead. And the e-allegation is a great tool to provide CBP with this information so we can go and target those shipments if you provide enough information to us. So we always encourage you to use these e-allegation tools if you have this information, because it will go directly to our targeting center. And if they vet the information and it's pretty complete, and we know what shipment it's coming into, what importer, the shipment can be pulled for examination, and we can stop the infringing goods from coming into our border. So best practices in working with CBP to help enforce your IP at the border. Number 1, be recorded. If you're not recorded, it is very simple, pretty inexpensive, to $190 per international class for 10 years. And this provides border enforcement of your IP at the border. CBP is constantly looking out for infringing merchandise. You do not have to do anything except hopefully respond to our authentication emails whenever we contact you. But this is very different than some other countries where the right holder has to constantly go to the customs agency and ask them to seize X shipment. Our CBP officers have the data from our recordation database, and they are constantly looking out for infringing merchandise. Sorry. Number 2 is be current. We ask you to update the recordation database if you have any changes. If there's a new specimen, please provide us the new specimen. If there's a change in the manufacturing country, please give us that information. Number 3, be thorough. So as I mentioned earlier, as much information you can provide to CBP ensures the best enforcement of your IP. Number 4, be informed. So CBP offers a variety of tools for trainings. So we really encourage you to take advantage of those and train our officers on your products. Number 5, be responsive. Again, this recordation program lets CBP know that you want to be an active participant in enforcing your IP. So when we do reach out to you for assistance, please respond to us and help us enforce your IP. 6, be proactive. And 7, be engaged. I have links to resources here. The slides, I believe, will be made available afterward. So you are able to use these links. And this is my email here if you have any questions. If you have any recordation questions, you can email iprrquestions@cbp.dhs.gov. And if you have any enforcement matter questions, you can email HQ iprBranch@cbp.dhs.gov. And if there are any questions, happy to take those now or after. Or also email is fine as well. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Suzanne. Her presentation, obviously went through all of the steps of how to get a recommendation and use your trademark registration before CBP. But one thing that I just really want to emphasize is that the CBP model is extremely useful and powerful, frankly. Most of the goods that are going to come across the borders, and it's a very low cost for you to get a very high output in your enforcement. So it's very minimal work on your end to simply copy and paste a trademark registration in the CBP system, and it's also a very low cost to get it done. And the vast majority of enforcement does happen at the border. So it's an important tool to utilize, and it's a tool that's not necessarily available globally. It's something that we excel at in the United States, and it's something that trademark registrants should definitely make use of.
Holly's given us a little time back, and so I'm going to try to use this opportunity for some of our friends online to ask a couple of questions. We've got a large group of attendees on Teams right now, and we want to be able to hear from them. So these questions are for Suzanne. Suzanne, do you mind coming up? We're going to sort of use these few minutes to answer 2 questions that we've received. And while she's coming, I hope everyone is enjoying this. I'm sitting here taking all these notes. I hope I can read them later because I'm writing fast. But it's been great information so far. Come on up, Suzanne. And you can use one of these microphones here if you'd like. Let's see. We'll test it out to make sure it works. Okay. Yeah. All right. Our first question. Here's one of our attendees asking, I think my attorney recorded for me, but is there a way that I can check the status of my recordation on my own because maybe they don't want to pay those billable hours? What do you think?
Yes, so as I mentioned earlier, there are 2 different databases for recordations. So the public database is called IPRS. If you just Google IPRS CBP, you'll be brought to the database, and then you can put in your USPTO registration number. You can put in the name of the registration. It is very easy to search. So again, IPRS, just Google that. If you don't find it right away, put in CBP as well. You'll be brought to the homepage. Again, very easy database to search with limited information, and that is very different than the internal database, which is called IPRIS, IPRIS. You will not be able to find that database because that is just CBP's internal database. But again, the database, IPRS, you can check your recordation there, make sure it's active. And another thing I just wanted to highlight is to record, you do not need an attorney. You can do, as the right holder, you can go on and record, very simple process, about 30 minutes. And once you complete all the steps, go on IPRS to make sure it is active.
Thank you for that. And I can speak for when I used to work in-house for a national sorority. We spent a lot of time registering products with your office, okay, and the process was not too daunting. So here's another question. How do I search the CBP database? So you mentioned that a moment ago. The query really is it the same as searching in the USPTO database? Is it a similar interface?
It is a slightly different interface, but we have made it very simple to search. So again, you can search by the USPTO registration number. You can search by the name of the registration and recordation. You have a CBP recordation number, so you can also search by that. Because CBP officers are out in the field and they might not always know the name of the trademark registration, you can also use descriptive terms. Just for an example, Loewe has kind of a cursive L, and if the officer doesn't know exactly what that mark is, you can type into the IPRS search letter L, and it will also populate all of the recorded trademarks. So we've made it very easy to search our database, and if you have any questions, you can please feel free to email me later or any of the email addresses previously listed.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes. Okay. We have an extra mic. We're going to bring it to you. Thank you.
Thank you. My question is, has CBP had any issues with maybe bad actors trying to hijack or change the recordation? I'm just wondering if someone files a recordation and then the person against whom, like the infringer or some infringing party, kind of somehow hijacks that recordation to withdraw it or cancel it. If you've had any instances like that, and if so, how do you handle that?
So we have not had any instances of that to my knowledge. Once you record with CBP to make any changes, you have to email one of the email addresses I previously listed on company letterhead to ensure that none of those bad actors are going in and trying to change information. Additionally, the recordation usually stays live with the underlying USPTO registration. And the only time it really would ever be canceled is if the trademark is canceled with the USPTO or there's some other registration issue. So we have not had any issues with the bad actors that you were mentioning.
Suzanne, you mentioned that there is a public-facing website and then one that is internal-facing for CBP only. I guess I think it might be helpful for folks to know what's the difference and what's that information that is confidential, just so if people do want to provide proprietary information about their business, how do they know that what's going to be public and what's not?
Yes, sorry, I wish I had a slide in my presentation that showed the differences. But on the public-facing site, it's very limited information. There are no images at all. So you just have the name of the mark, contact information, registration term, USPTO registration number. However, on the internal database, there's a lot more information. You can see the registered mark. You get to see the specimens. Whether there's any special lever rule or gray market protection, any authentication guides. country of manufacturer. All of this information is just available on IPRIS, not IPRS. So again, if you go on our public-facing website, IPRS, very limited, just the registration number, point of contact, the date that it was valid, and expiration date. None of the information related to country of manufacturer, licensees, specimens, or authentication guides are available on the public-facing website. That is just for CBP use only, and any misuse of this business-sensitive information, we actually face liability for. So you can rest assured that this is just for authentication purposes. CBP officers are not using this to their advantage and actually have personal liability for any misuse of this information.
Thank you so much. Okay. Oh, we have one more. Oh, wonderful. And this will be the last question, then we'll just go ahead and take our break until 10:20. We'll reconvene.
Thank you for such an excellent presentation and for such a skillful job in answering questions. So I have perhaps the hardest question to present to you. We hear quite a bit. How can CBP effectively help me given the large number of goods that come in daily and the large number of ports of entry? What can I do as a company to better help CBP in detecting infringing and counterfeit products?
So the first thing that I would advise is to make sure that you are recorded with CBP. Record for all of the international classes of goods, provide CBP with as much information as you can. I mentioned the e-allegations earlier, but if you have any specific information relating to importers, you can use the e-allegation tool to provide that to our targeting center so we can pull the shipments. As well as, take advantage of the training opportunities, the product authentication guides that you can submit to CBP. Because, as I mentioned earlier, as much information as we have will help us help you protect your intellectual property. So be an active and engaged partner with us, and that really ensures the best border protection for your IP.
Okay. Thank you, Attorney Shultz. We appreciate you staying a little longer to answer those questions for us. We're going to break for just a moment.
Okay, so our next question is for Suzanne from Customs Border Protection. Could you please provide a brief overview on the steps that CBP takes when counterfeit goods are intercepted at the border? What are the specific steps that an officer would work through, and how does your office counsel those officers?
So I'm not going to go through the whole targeting stage, but essentially when a CBP officer is examining a shipment and they pull it aside and they'll go, they'll obviously look at the merchandise, and then they will go on IPRIS, the internal site, to check for a protected trademark or protected copyright. They'll make sure it's for the correct class of goods. They will do an assessment for themselves. I will first note that CBP has the competent authority to make the authenticity determination. This means that CBP is the one deciding if something is counterfeit or not. With that being said, we do try to reach out to right holders. It is our best practice to get right holder input. So this means that if there is any question on the authenticity of the goods, the CBP officer or someone from my branch, an attorney advisor, will contact the right holder, the point of contact that they included when recording the mark. So this means that sometimes you will get an email from either an attorney in my branch or a CBP officer, but this does not mean you will always get an email. However, if a seizure does take place, you will get notice of that seizure.
Thank you.
I'll say one thing.
Yeah, please.
If you're a new registrant or a registrant that hasn't done this, record your registration with Customs. It's not difficult, it's not expensive, and maybe it doesn't ever snag anything, but it helps them do their job. We got monthly phone calls from agents saying, we picked this up, is this legit, not whatever, help them make their decision. Just record, because it's easy.
Thank you. Yeah, do you want to?
This is Dawn Nelson from HSI, and I totally echo exactly what you said. And even if you are somebody who only does domestic manufacturing, record with CBP. Why? Because the counterfeiter is making your product outside the United States, and they're bringing it in through a port of entry somewhere, right? CBP needs you to record with them so that they know what to look for, so that they can take action. And if you're sitting here going, no, I only make it in the United States, that stuff's just coming in, and it's just coming in, and it's just coming in. So it's so important to record with CBP.
Yeah, the last thing I'll throw on that, if you get a call from Customs asking for help, give it to them. Yeah. Don't sit on it for a week. We're busy, call them back. They need to move. The stuff has to move. And I can't tell you the number of times I've heard them express that frustration. And my own people who didn't get around to it, and a whole shipment got through. Not because it shouldn't have, because our people didn't get back to them. So
Yeah, they're doing the work for us, so make use of it.
make their life easy.